Today I will tell you the most important things you need to know regarding the mechanics of the enemies for the latest Purification. So let's start with the first note, first wave. For this wave, you need to kill 20 enemies basically. Since every time you kill an enemy, the main HP bar will have his HP reduced by minus 5%. But there is a catch, and that is that once when you kill a certain enemy, that the main HP will be reduced by 6%. But that still doesn't change the fact that you still need to kill 20 enemies. That was also the case with the first Purification, with this whole new grid mechanic. And there, when you had killed the first enemy in the first wave, the main HP bar would have his HP reduced by 6%. But still doesn't change the fact that you still need to kill 20 enemies, since 20 times 5 is 100%. So if you're in a situation where you see that the main HP bar is like 4% and you have your, let's say, Ying1 ult available, then you can hold onto that Ying1 ult for the second wave so that you don't overkill. And maybe you don't even need to skill with Ying1, because if there's an enemy with like 10% HP, a Ying1 basic attack would also kill that enemy and you will go to the second wave. But anyway, what do the enemies do? Well, the first enemy, the most important thing you need to know is basically that he does only single target attacks. That's it. Nothing special, nothing that messes up the whole flow of your team. This robot enemy, you might already noticed, when he attacks, he gets a barrier, and only Dot can go through that barrier. And how do you remove that barrier? When you attack him. That's it. Really annoying. Or if you have a really consistent DPS who can do a lot of weakness breaks, because he gets many turns, then you won't even get to a point where these robots will get a barrier to begin with. And then of course we got the irritating trash can. The focus of trash can is not to kill him but to weakness break him, since he's really tanky. And how do you weakness break him, since we see he has no weakness types? Well, when you attack him, he will get the weakness type of the ally that attacked. So let's say if I attack with Ho him, he will get the wind type, but he can only hold up to 2 weakness types. So I do not want to attack him with Ho, since now he can only get 1 other weakness type. And favorably, that weakness type would be Ying1 and Jade. Otherwise, weakness breaking him will be way more difficult. So keep that in mind. You want to have weakness types on the trash can of the allies who do the most consistent attacks. And now we can go to the second wave, where things get a little bit more spicy, because these are new enemies. And the most important thing to know about these enemies is this. They all have one thing in common. And that is, as you might have noticed, these stacks they got. Why are these stacks important for us? Well, they are important for us because every time these stacks go to 0, so let's say this enemy's stacks go to 0, then we get rewarded for it. What is the reward we get when an enemy, their stacks go to 0? Well, the first thing is that they take big damage. I reduce this enemy's stacks to 0. What happens? It takes lots of damage. Regarding the small enemies, so these ones, when the stacks reach to 0, they lose 33% of their HP. And that's a lot. Regarding the boss, when he gets 0 stacks though, he loses like around 5% or something. It doesn't really matter, since the main way to kill this boss is by killing the small enemy, since every time you kill a small enemy, the boss will lose 3% HP. Anyway, alright, we know, and we reduce the stacks to 0, small enemies lose 33% HP, but they also get their action delayed. But also, the character that reduced the stacks to 0 gets a little bit of energy. And now the question is, how do you remove the stacks to 0 to begin with? Well, every time you attack an enemy, they lose 1 stack. So if I attack with Ying1 this enemy, then Sunday, and then Jade, Jade would be the one who would reduce the stacks to 0. She would be the one to get the little bit of extra energy. And to make it clear, so Ying1 attacks, the stacks would be 2 out of 3. Sunday attacks. We never attack with Sunday, but let's say we attack with him. The stacks would be 1 out of 3. Jade attacks, and the stacks of the enemy would be 0 out of 3. So, in this case, she would get nice energy. So now we know reducing the stacks of the enemies to 0 does a big chunk of damage to the enemies, delays their action, and gives the character that reduced the stacks to 0 a little bit of energy. But sometimes the DPS already kills the small enemies before you can manage to get their stacks to 0. That's possible too, of course. And it's alright, since it is more a nice to have. Since let's say if an enemy had like 1 out of 3 stacks and his HP is like this. Yes, like how much percent is this? 20% HP left. If this is the case, and let's say it is Ho-Ho's turn and Ying1 has ultimate, then we can hold onto this ultimate for a bit. Then we can decide to ult with Ying1 after Ho-Ho does a basic attack against this enemy. So she reduces the enemy's stacks to 0 out of 3 and kills the enemy. Since we know for the small enemies, when their stacks get reduced to 0, they lose 33% HP. So it would kill a small enemy, Uho would get a bit of energy, and now Yungon can cast his ult for the new enemy that will spawn with full HP and 3 out of 3 stacks. But there is also one thing we haven't discussed, and that is, how do the enemies get stacks to begin with? That's luckily simple. The enemies get stacks at the end of their turn. So if an enemy had 1 out of 3 stacks and their turn ends, they have 3 out of 3 stacks. So it always regenerates to the full amount. Same case with if they had 0 out of 3 stacks, their turn ends, they start with 3 out of 3 stacks again. For the small enemies, that will never be the case since they would be already dead. But for the boss, we want to make sure that he ends his turn with 0 out of 6 stacks. So you would have made use of that extra damage you did and the energy he would have regenerated. Because if he ends his turn with 1 out of 6 stacks, well then he would regenerate stacks to 6 out of 6 stacks again. That means damage missed and energy missed, and he wouldn't have delayed his action. So for this big boss enemy, make sure you always reduce his stacks to 0 before his turn ends. That's the conclusion. But now, what does the boss even do? We know what the stacks do, and that applies to all these new enemies, but what does the boss do? What are his mechanics? He's luckily quite simple. He has this weird attack which does like a sweep attack. So he targets one side of your team. So he attacks these 3 enemies with one attack, and he does another attack and attacks now these 3 enemies and doesn't attack Wohoden. Nothing special. The only real special thing is that he has this charging state, which is this one. He goes into this cool stance, and you can see in the action bar, when he goes into this charging state and he gets his turn, then he will do like a big AoE attack and apply vulnerability on your allies. So your allies would get increased damage. So how do we make sure he goes out of this charging state? By weakness breaking him. If you weakness break him, he'll go out of this charging state, he won't do that AoE attack and apply vulnerability on your allies. That's it basically. And now what do the small enemies do? Well, the archer, nothing special actually. The same case with the enemy without any weapons. The archer just does some pew pew attacks, and if her stacks would have been reduced to 0, she wouldn't do that many pew pew attacks anymore. That's basically, but by that time she should already have been dead. And with this enemy, he only does single target attacks, nothing special. They luckily don't do anything that obstructs the wall flow of your team. If you just make sure you can do consistent AoE attacks in the best case scenario, or consistent blast attacks, you would be fine. And of course you can raw dog it with a Sele or Feisha team, that's possible too. But having consistent AoE attacks would make your life quite a bit easier. You can, let's say, pair a Feisha with a Herta and a Jade team, then your Herta and Jade would be the consistent AoE attackers, and then your Feisha would do the raw dogging of the boss in the third node, which is Cocolia. So let's go over her mechanics. Luckily for us, Cocolia isn't that irritating in this purification, since the only irritating thing she does is that single target attack, which has a chance to freeze you. And if you get frozen, make sure you have a reactive cleanser, and with reactive I mean someone like a Lucha, a Lynx, or a Gallagher, to make sure that your character is not frozen when he gets his turn. Since if you are frozen and you get the turn, your action would be delayed. So before that time, make sure you aren't frozen anymore. And that's basically the only irritating thing of Cocolia. And of course she has this charging state, and then the next turn she does a big AoE attack, sure. But that freeze attack is the only really irritating thing you need to keep in mind regarding Cocolia. But actually, the real enemy of this wave is this dog. That is because when he dies, he applies bleed on the adjacent enemies. And this bleed hits really hard. So that means we want to make sure that when you kill this dog, that he is beside Cocolia, since Cocolia is the boss. But we have situations like this. A dog who is not adjacent to Cocolia. How do we make sure he explodes on Cocolia then? So Cocolia gets that bleed on her. And of course also that little bit of speed, but we want to get the bleed on her. Well, that is by doing a big AoE attack or blast attack that kills this monster and the dog at the same time. Since if they die at the same time, the dog will swap to this location and then explode. So Cocolia will be able to get that bleed now. So that is why big strong AoE attacks or blast attacks are really preferred in this purification. And yeah, we also got this flying monster here. He doesn't do anything special. He has single target attacks and blast attacks. When you see him do a blast attack, just know that the next attack he will do is a single target attack, which will do quite a lot of damage. So make sure when you see him doing a blast attack that he is dead before the next turn. But all of that will happen automatically when you do your consistent AoE or blast attacks. The main focus is just to make sure that when you have a situation like this, that you do a blast or AoE attack that kills this flying monster and the dog at the same time, so that the dog explodes here and applies bleed on Cocolia. That's it basically. And of course, every enemy death will reduce Cocolia's HP by -3%. Every enemy you kill, doesn't matter which one. That is the case for every wave in this purification apart from the first wave. So now, node 2, wave 1. It's the same case as with the first node, shared HP bar. Make sure you kill 20 enemies, since every enemy you kill reduces the main HP by 5%. There is this one enemy that reduces it by 6% just once, but it doesn't matter since you still need to kill 20 enemies, since 20 times 5 is 100%. So what do the enemies do? Well, there is this Fua enemy, and that is this enemy right here. What he does is basically mark an ally like him. When this ally of him attacks, let's say attacks Herta, this enemy will do a blast follow-up attack. That's basically what he does. And this enemy only does single target attacks. Nothing special. The only special enemy in this wave is, of course, the trash can, since the goal is not to kill him, since he's really tanky, but to weakness break him. How do you weakness break him? You get a weakness type of the ally that attacks him. So if Herta attacks him, he will get ice weakness, and he can only get 2 weakness type on his head. So make sure you don't apply a weakness type on him of an character that doesn't do consistent attacks. So let's say, just like with the first note, don't apply wind type on this trash can with Ho-Ho. Make sure he gets lightning and quantum weakness type by attacking with Jade and Xing1. The trash can, and not with Sunday or Ho-Ho. That's it basically. And that is all you need to know about the first wave. So now to the second wave. This wave is a bounce wave, since there are 2 enemies who do bounce attacks. We got this Gunner, he does a bounce attack. It has 6 bounces. So we just need to get lucky that it is nice spread out instead of all of these 6 bounces going onto Herta's head, reducing her HP like to 20% go already. So that's just RNG. The other enemy that does bounces is the boss, since he can go into this charging state, and when he does an attack the next turn, that attack will do 5 bounces. So same case, hope that it is nice spread out. If not, and you need to waste a skill point of Gallagher on someone, resulting in skill point issues here and there, it's just bad luck. I just restart then. And a thing to note also regarding this boss enemy is that every attack he does has a chance to apply a dot on you. That's it. There's nothing more really that you need to know about him, but there is one thing you need to know about this sword enemy here, and that is that with any attack she does has a chance to apply a debuff on you called refurb, but let's call it refurb for now. This debuff refurb itself doesn't do anything, but when you get attacked by any enemy and you have refurb on you, so let's say 1 bounce hits you while you have refurb, then this refurb will go, but you will get another debuff, and that is called strong refurb. And that is bad, because when you get this debuff, your action will be delayed and you cannot do anything until your next turn. So make sure that when you have refurb applied on you, that you can cleanse it immediately before anyone attacks you, since if you get this strong refurb debuff on you, even if you cleanse that stun on you, your action would have already been delayed. So you would miss DPS, things will get a bit messy. So it is just hoping that you don't get applied this orange refurb to begin with. So having effect resistance would be nice, but you aren't building effect resistance on your D Herta or normal Herta. So if they get refurb on their head and they get attacked and get strong refurb, I just restart, just bad RNG. You cannot do anything about that. And now on to the last wave, where we got Argenti. There's only one really important thing to know about this wave, and that is that when you kill a summon, you will get rewarded. Obviously, the default reward all of their deaths will give you is that Argenti's HP will be reduced by -3%. That's the case with every summon, apart from the first wave in this purification. But there's also specific rewards you will get depending on which summon you kill. Let's start with this Lance summon. When you kill him, every enemy will get a little bit of damage. But the most interesting thing that it does is reduce every enemy's their toughness by a little bit. By how much? For the small enemies, by 1/3. And with Argenti's toughness, it will reduce it a little bit. Always welcome. Not that much, since his toughness is really much, since he's the boss, of course. That's all you need to know about the Lance. If you kill him, every enemy gets a little bit of damage, and their toughness gets reduced by a little bit. What happens when you kill a Rose summon? Well, the ally that killed the Rose will get a damage boost. So we want to make sure that we kill the Roses with our damage dealer. So in our case, the Herta or small Herta. But there is also a catch regarding summons, and that is that when they are enhanced, and how do you know they are enhanced? Well, they are glowing yellow a little bit, as you can see, like this Rose. Compared to this Rose, he has this yellow outline thingies going on. That means it is enhanced. So if you kill an enhanced summon, the reward you will get will also be better. Regarding the Rose, you will get 2 stacks of this damage boost. So the character that killed this summon will have a damage boost for a couple of turns. Super nice. But if you kill an enhanced Lance, then the damage it does when he dies is more to the enemies, and the toughness it reduces will also be double. So for example, this summon, its toughness bar will be reduced by double the amount, and same case with Argenti's toughness. So always appreciated a little bit of toughness reduction. So when you see someone who is glowing a bit yellow, make sure you kill him to make clearing this wave a bit easier. But that should already happen automatically. The only thing you need to keep in mind is that you kill an enhanced Rose with your damage dealer and not with your Gallagher, for example, accidentally. So alright, we know if they are enhanced, they will give better reward. How did they get enhanced in the first place? Well, that is what Argenti does. Sometimes at start of his turn, he just waves his hand and enhances a random summon of his. And that brings us to Argenti. What does he do? Nothing special actually. He has some single target attacks, he has some AoE attacks, nothing that really obstructs the flow of your whole team like imprisonments or action delays luckily. All you need to really pay attention to is when he waves his hand, you know, he has enhanced someone who is enhanced. Well, the someone who is glowing yellow, prioritize killing that summon and he will be fine. But that should already happen automatically if you can just do your consistent AoE or blast attacks. Or if you go for like a Fei Shao or a Sailor team or a single target DPS with as sub DPS small Herta because you want to raw dog Argenti with your Fei Shao, then make sure you kill that glowing Rose with your Fei Shao then I'd say. But it really depends on your whole strategy. But I want you to remember this though. You can play with Tribi and all of her reruns in this Pure Fiction, since Tribi will be releasing on the 26th of February and the last day of this Pure Fiction will be on Sunday the 16th of March. So that means you got lots of time, but if you're still unsure whether you want to summon for Eklia will be releasing soon and still want to plan out your pools, then you can wait a little bit since on the 11th of February the 3.2 drip marketing should be released if they keep up that 42-day cycle that every time a new drip marketing comes and all that stuff. But if you're still unsure, well, on the 14th of February, the live stream is also expected for 3.1. So you still got a little bit of time to plan out your pools. But my point is basically that you don't need to stress. You got lots of time until the end of the Spirit Fiction. The focus is to get your rewards before it refreshes. Just do what is the most fun for you. You can raw dog the boss. You can go for no sustain teams, no 5-star teams. Whatever you think gives you the most joy in this Pure Fiction. If you don't want to do all the retries because you get unlucky the whole time, then don't. It is just a couple of jades. But if you want to get the jades and you enjoy the whole process, then do it of course. You are the boss. Just know you got lots of time. There will be many events until this Pure Fiction ends that will make building your characters better a bit easier. So I thank you for paying attention and see you the next time. Bye.